After Wolbert had left the Crescent yesterday, Audia took some time to think about the issue related to him. Despite her coldness and ignoring towards him, he still would greet her, even smile at her as if nothing had really happened. It made the demoness think about two options. One, he was incredibly stupid. Two, there was something about him that was yet unknown to her, or maybe misunderstood. The first option was ruled out almost instantly. As for the second one, the demoness sat down that evening and thought about everything she already knew about him. He had a soul, a beating heart, no wings, no halo, no divine energy curling through him. Heck, he was half robot. But he had an energy different from a human's or a cyborg, one that Audia couldn't put a name to. She walked towards an unknown direction, relying solely to her senses. They would bring her to him, they always did. After walking with her heels being the only silence breaker, soon she could make out his form, sitting at the edge of a fallen bridge. She made sure her presence would be known and kept quiet for a little while before deciding to speak.
You're not an angel, are you?
Wolbert looked down towards the ocean, the vantage point of the bridge providing an excellent view at the city below, letting it almost appear like a miniature set up from a time now long gone. He had looked all day and night for Haley but been unable to find her. Exhausted and in need of a break, he had found himself here of all places. He knew his old gear was still somewhere down there, deep under the unrelenting waves that crashed against the ragged edges of this pitiful piece of land. Sitting down to be alone with his thoughts, he pulled up his knees and folded his arms over them, stabilizing himself as he sends one half of his brain to rest, while the other continues a silent vigil. For a long time, just the faraway drone of the city drifts up from below, a non-distinct hum barely audible this high up. A lone cockroach vanished into one of the many gaps of the broken structure. A rune came up in his vision, indicating a presence in the outer perimeter. Not moving as more and more systems came online. The steps come to a halt and there was silence. Then there was a voice, cold yet curious, and maybe, just maybe, with a soft edge to it. Still, he was never sure how the demoness would behave when he met her inside the city. Shaking his head but not turning around, he answers her question, making sure to speak loud enough for her to hear. "No, Audia, I'm not." He pauses for a moment, as if he had to think for a while. "Once I was a soldier, created in a lab and modified to suit the purpose of war. Now," he looks for words, "now I am one of you's reapers." Audia curses under her breath, looking to the side and hardly biting the inside of her cheek. If he was Wolbert's boss, then it was him who had reached out to her that day at the pier. A joyless chuckle left her lips, realizing that somehow they would always find her, no matter how far she ran.
That motherfucker is playing puppets with humans now,
she asks with a voice full of hatred.
and he has the audacity to tell me how to live my life?
Her voice trembled there, and she wished it didn't. With a deep breath in and eyes closed, the demoness worked on keeping herself calm and collected. Those bastards would love seeing her in distress and bleeding out. Wolbert turns around as a sound of great stress was recognizable despite the fact she tried to hide it. The expression on the man's face made it clear he couldn't follow her, for he had not heard the voice that day. The hatred in her words hit him, even though it wasn't even fully directed at him. "Who is telling you to live your life?" his eyes looking at her neck. Even since the library, he was aware the bleeding would increase if she felt emotional stress. Getting up, he turns to face her. Déjà vu. A long time ago, he had stood here at this place, and it had been Haley standing in the place of the demoness. He swallowed hard at the memory, then pushed it away. That was then, this was now. Audia, what has heaven done to you? His voice low and gentle. Whatever it was, he could not make it undone, but maybe talking over it was a start to deal with the clear trauma she carried. Audia smiled with her teeth clenched, making it look like something was hurting. Not that it wasn't, that damn sting inside her throat was making it difficult to talk and even think.
Your fucking boss is.
She says without her usual coldness, maybe because she couldn't keep a steady voice anymore.
That day I got inside your fucking head, Uriel talked to me. I didn't understand it until now.
The edges of her open wound would start to cry out bloody tears, her voice muffling and sounding like she was choking for a moment. She stopped talking, didn't answer his other question, didn't want to, and instead coughed into her hand, making her palm and lips dirty. Bulbert comes closer a step in disbelief. You heard you? Why would the demoness hear the voice? As she fell silent, he takes another step, but unsure if it would upset her even more, he stops. Audia? The lips showed blood. I don't know what he said to you. I haven't heard him in ever since I got out from the abyss. That was true. He had even thought the voice was gone. Maybe he lost interest. That Audia heard it while in his emotions was disconcerting. He takes another step closer to her. Telekinesis. If she decided to fling him down the bridge. Audia coughed again, holding her forearm in front of her mouth, tasting the metallic liquid rising from her slashed throat. Her free hand was held out, palm facing Bulbert to warn him not to approach anymore. She took a few steps back and they went to where they had been before.
None of that bullshit again.
Her pained expression turned into a grimace. He was not getting close to her and making her vulnerable again. After all, he worked for him, and just like him, he would want to make her break. Those wrong thoughts were quickly flooding her overthinking mind, which could make things turn out for the worse really quick. Bulbert comes to a halt. Somehow sensing they stood on a knife's edge and things could go either way. I am not your enemy, Audia. Raising his hands up slowly, stretching them out to the sides. Your throat. Please, you need to calm down. There was honest worry in his tone. If she didn't allow him to touch her, he couldn't pull her back like he had done in the Zodiac. She was too far away. A half step. I'm not bullshitting you. I never have and I never will. He looked from side to side. There was nothing but a steep drop down onto the concrete and buildings below. I am not your enemy. The voice low. Bulbert repeated the words over and over to make sure they reached the demoness's stressed mind. Audia's throat suddenly throbbed that painfully that it forced the demoness to double over and completely forget that she was trying to keep Bulbert as far as possible from her. His words echoed inside her head, clashing against the other side that was screaming at her to not let him manipulate her so easily. She tightly wrapped one hand around her neck in hopes to stop her bleeding, as blood slid out of her parted lips, staining the dark concrete below. With her airways half blocked and struggling to breathe, she fell to her knees. It had never gotten that bad before, not since… Volbert's concern for Audia's well-being skyrocketing as he sees her double over and dark blood stain the concrete. Could she die? Could the cursed wound of her neck actually bring her down and end her? As she fell to her knees, he throws caution to the wind.
Audia!
The armored shape quickly crossing the distance with large steps propelled by reinforced muscles and joints. Halfway there, reaching out to catch her should she tumble. Almost there. Volbert rushes forward in a fluid motion, a trained soldier tempered and hardened on uncountable battlefields, a large black cloak billowing around his massive frame, like large black wings. Audia, even with her mind melting down from its chaos, the demonic senses alarmed her of a presence approaching her at full speed. She gave in to her reflexes and slammed her fist against the hard concrete, causing the surface to crack and a wave of smoke lift itself, heading towards Volbert so fast that it was too late for him to do anything to even protect himself. The wave clashes into him, enough for the Marine to get sent flying back at the edge of the bridge. The smoke vanishes the second it finishes its job, when Audia finally realizes what she did. She lifts her head, the hand clutching her neck all bloody, but she removes it from there, then rushes towards Volbert to help him. Volbert is inches away from reaching her, his fingertips almost at the outer strands of her hair as the world explodes and something hits him in the chest. Only the heavy armor saving him from having his reinforced chest carved in. A grunt escapes him as the wind is knocked out of him so completely as if he had been hit by the fist of a dreadnought. For a moment he realizes he's flung through the air just to crash down onto the old fragmented concrete a fraction of a second later, the impact briefly dipping him into the blackness of unconsciousness as the force of the movement lets his heavy body slide over the ground, scratching and ripping at him, his face covered in bloody scratches where the rough surface has ripped away his skin, revealing the raw flesh beneath. His feet sliding over the edge as he comes back to, his hips sliding over the edge as he instinctively looks for something to hold on to, his mind working on overtime. Suddenly the shift in weight pulls him down, fingers scraping over the ribs and tears but not finding any purchase. He feels himself begin to fall. No! As the world starts to turn, suddenly he feels a rusty pipe at one hand and he holds on with grim life. The jarring of the impact as his body comes to a halt, dangling over the waves below, his arm burning almost immediately. While he was far stronger than any human, he was also far heavier. Reaching up with his other hand to get a better grip, but the winds so high up buffeted him, letting him swing. His hand sliding down the pipe slowly. Again he tries to get a better grip. Audia! He calls out. Audia runs faster, falling on her knees and sliding forward before laying down and catching his other hand with both of hers. One around his, one wrapped around his forearm.
Not today!
She shakes her head and clenches her teeth before boosting her entire body with what energy she had remaining and started to pull his heavy body up.
Come on!
She yells at him and herself at the same time, managing to pull herself up on her knees and holding tightly onto his arm, lifting him higher. Volbert feels her hand in his, the other on his upper arm as she begins to pull, blood pouring out from her slashed throat. Audia! The words the same, the tone different. Using all his power, the pipe begins to bend under his grip as he pulls himself up with her aid. For a brief moment he hangs in nothingness, only supported by a tennis hold. Then it's over as her abilities allowing him to finally find a purchase with his feet, and he slides back onto the ledge, the solid concrete beneath him. The sudden change of weight letting them both fall backwards onto the bridge. Breathing hard, Walbert needs a moment to orient himself. She could have let him fall, but she didn't. The blood, her neck, Audia. Turning around to the demoness, quickly crawling to her body, pressing a hand on her neck. Audia, stay with me, come on. The blood gushing between his fingers. Come on, fight this! His grip slick with her live blood. Audia, Audia, stay with me, stay with me. Audia, stay with me. Audia groans loudly, giving one last pull, helping him securely climb back up. Then her grip on him loosens. She falls back the second she realizes he is safe, her body suddenly giving up. Her vision darkens, her ears start ringing, hearing his muffled shouts. However, she manages to murmur something to him while struggling to keep her eyes open.
Have you considered using carbon fiber instead?
And with a small smile, somehow finding herself funny even at the brink of fainting, she gives in to the exhaustion and passes out. Walbert feels her fading, reaching for her shoulder with his free hand shaking her. Stay with me! Stay with me! For a moment he hesitates, unsure how to save her. Then he takes a deep breath, closing his eyes, digging in his memories, looking, searching, feels the heat of the abyss at his skin, the hell-forged chains on his wrists. Raven, the armored monstrosity standing a few feet away when suddenly warmth floods him as he feels her hand on his cheek, her words in his mind.
I forgive you.
The serenity that flooded him, the peace and the calm at her touch and words. Holding on to the memory, he bends down, lifting the woman's head carefully with his free hand, the other still pressing on the injury of her throat, as he puts a kiss on her forehead, willing all those emotions to the empath. Audia feels those emotions he put through her penetrate right inside her head and into her mind. The bleeding abruptly stops. That small frozen smile from before she passed out slowly stretches a little more. She's breathing steadily now and her human body starts recovering slowly. What Walbert doesn't know is that during that exchange, not only did he gift her his emotions, but that snippet of his memories as well. It's part of Audia now too, however when she discovers it, it's only a matter of time. Walbert feels the demoness steer underneath him as slowly the blood flow lessens from her wound. Breaking the kiss, he rights himself, sitting on his heels, carefully pulling her body up against his lap, holding her as comfortable as he can while the wound is closing. One arm underneath her upper back, the other draped over her hips supporting her. Not caring the least, he left bloody handprints on her clothing. Looking down at her, he doesn't speak, just glad she was there for him and that she was still with him now. This place had seen its share of twists and sorrows. Some of it his, and now of hers as well. Cradling her slowly for a moment while he waited for the wound to fully seal. Then he would slide his hand that had rested on her hips underneath her knees, brightening himself up, lifting her light body with ease as he made to carry her back into Kola proper.